Hello, I'm Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to Coffee Talks. Today we have something a little different. Seeing as we are in the middle of award season, we thought it would be great to assemble a group of film and media TV critics to talk shop, talk about their business, their work, and their writings. And seeing as it's also Black History Month, why not make it a roundtable of Black film critics? So I'm going to do my intros alphabetically and then step off stage and hand over to our group. So first up, she's a freelance TV and film journalist. She contributes to the New York Times, Elle, and Huffington Post. Candice Frederick is here with us. Hey, Candice, do you want to turn on your step on stage? How you doing?
I'm well. How are you? Glad to be here.
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Where are you?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after lunch for you. Thanks for joining us.
Towards the end of the day, yeah.
Yeah. It's great to have you with us. Next up, he's the editor-in-chief of lenoirauteur.net. That's the website too, lenoirauteur.net, and a member of the Hollywood Critics Association, and someone I know quite well. Terence Johnson is here. Hey, Terence, step up on stage. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing good. How about you?
Very well, thanks. You're in your man cave, your little.
I'm in my like den, my living room den here in Los Angeles.
Thanks for joining us. I'll be scanning the shelves while you speak here. I recognize anything there. Next up, he's the managing editor for We Live Entertainment. He's contributor to Variety and co-host of the podcast Out Now with Aaron and Abe. Aaron Neuwirth is with us. Hey, Aaron.
Hello.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? I already heard that, but I asked anyway because I want to know also.
Also in your movie den, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Lots of goodies there behind you. Yeah, you got a lot of Blu-ray and DVD envy from people in the audience, I'm sure. So
now 4K envy as well, I guess.
Wow. Where are you joining us from?
I am down in Orange County, California.
Great. And then finally do our moderator here. He is the none other than the co-founder and president of the African American Film Critics Association. He's written for the LA Times, Fortune magazine, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, among many others. Gil Robertson is with us. Hey, Gil.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Where are you joining?
And I'm in Marietta, Georgia, right now.
Okay. So we may have a surprise guest joining us later, but for now, I'm going to step off stage and let the four of you start chatting, and I'll be back to wrap it up at the very end. So take it away, Gil.
Great. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
Thursday.
It's happy Thursday.
We're almost there.
We're almost there, So, and we're almost at the end of Black History Month. So, yeah, hopefully it was a good month for everybody.
It was short as usual.
As usual.
Yeah, it was good. It was busy. Good.
Yeah.
Yes, it has been. So, let's talk about each of your pathways to your present, situation as journalists. Candice, why don't we start off with you? What was your inspiration, and what type of preparation did you initially take in terms of, was there any kind of formal training, or was just simply something that you've just learned, had a natural gift for?
I went to school for journalism, so I have a degree in journalism. And from there, I've kind of been in media almost exclusively since then. My second professional job after getting a degree was at Essence. That was where I got my professional start as a journalist. I was there for a couple of years, and I was primarily writing and editing arts, lifestyle, books related stories. And it's a women's lifestyle magazine. So there was a lot of content that was catered specifically for Black women. So from there, I I think, I mean, I left there and I kind of took a completely different path, but I started like blogging. And that kind of, as I was doing that, as I had many day jobs while I was blogging, and I started blogging about film and TV, particularly because that was just something I was doing a lot of at the time, and I already had the journalism background. And so I just kind of, it was supposed to be something I was just doing in between jobs, but it turned out I'm still doing it like 15 years later. but yeah, I'm full-time freelance right now. I'm writing for a variety of publications. And so yeah, I do everything from like reported pieces, profiles, reviews. So it runs the gamut.
You're writing for some of the biggest magazines on this planet, so you're doing quite well, my friend.
Thank you.
Aaron, what about you? Let's talk about your path.
So it comes basically just from a passion for film and having the opportunity to find a way to present that. Early on, before I was professionally writing by any means, I was just kind of like blogging on this site Flickster that I think since become Rotten Tomatoes and all that. But during that time, and that's like 2006, I think. But eventually, I got over to Comic-Con one year where I met another writer, Brian White, who owns the site whysoblue.com. And because I'm a person that likes to talk to people, we were sitting in a panel together, and he told me about the site he was working on, like he was editing it in his chair. I told him how I enjoy writing about movies or what have you. So he gave me a shot at starting to publish reviews on an actual website as opposed to on a random movie blog page. Around that same time, I'd started my own blog, and combined between that and Why So Blue, I just started writing on a more frequent basis, and that from there just kind of built up as far as getting to know certain people, to get press contacts, to get PR contacts, which led me to getting actual like screenings to attend. Going along that path, just kind of putting in the hours essentially to write more and more reviews, which led me to meet more people. During that time, I also started the podcast I host with my friend Abe called Out Now with Aaron and Abe. So we talk about weekly movie releases there. And because I meet a lot of various journalists or what have you at screenings, I have guests on all the time with that. So it's a lot of just learning and meeting more and more people and getting more and more contacts. And that led me to eventually to We Live Entertainment, where I started writing there for Scott Menzel, the editor, creator of that site. And yeah, it's just opened up a lot of continued opportunities. So I've since moved on. As mentioned, I've contributed a couple times to Variety at this point. It's not a full-time job. It is just for me, it's like I can do this thing and I get a modicum amount of supplemental income for that, but it's still something I just really enjoy doing, and I'm very happy to have various outlets that are larger and larger that I can contribute to.
And it's your passion. It's your passion project.
Very much so. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. That's great. And Terence, what about you?
I definitely feel like I have the most roundabout way of getting to where I am. I started blogging when I was in undergrad, where I was getting a degree in civil engineering at Georgia Tech, because I was in Atlanta. And at the time, that was right when production started to move to Atlanta. So you had your Vampire Diaries, your Teen Wolves, and your Walking Dead were shot there. And so I started getting interested in film, and I had friends who were interested in film, and we'd go to Atlantic Station and they'd be like, hey, you like movies, why don't you write about them? And so I created my first blog called the Tomas Experience. Tomas was my Spanish nickname in high school. And based off of Nathaniel Rogers, who runs the Film Experience, I sort of used him as a template. But then, I went out into the working world, in the field of my degree was in. And I noticed there was a website, Award Circuit, run by Clayton Davis, who's now at Variety. And he was looking for people to write news. And I was like, well, I sit at a computer all day and I want to write about film. Maybe I can do this as well. And so that's sort of how I got my start. And I started off just being like, hey, this new trailer came out. Here's a bit about the trailer. And then that moved into covering film festivals and covering Comic-Con. And then eventually moving out here to come and do film school. And around that time, I sort of transitioned my blog to a much more professional. It's like a mix between a blog and a site. And yeah, I've just been doing that sort of ever since. And like Aaron, this is like it's a full-time hobby, but like not my full-time job. But it's just been great to be able to get to go to screenings and meet people and cover these festivals and get to talk about film and TV, which I'm passionate about.
Great. Yeah, doing it full time is not easy. I spent the majority of my career when I was actively writing freelancing, and it takes
Yes.
it's
Basically,
yeah. Candice, let's talk about that though. How you've been able to successfully though put the pieces together and really create a sustainable life for yourself as a freelance A&E journalist and film critic.
It's not easy. And I get that question a lot, and my short answer is I don't know.
Lighting candles and
lighting candles and saying a little prayer about it. I will say that I have a lot of drive. I have my ear on the ground a lot. I'm a hustler by nature. I think I'm originally from Boston. I've been living in New York for about probably about 21 years now. And so once I got here, I just hit the ground. I just started. That was kind of how I approached every job I had. And when I became a professional journalist, and when I started going more into the film and TV route of journalism, I just absorbed everything that I could. I read everything that I could in terms of like articles, in terms of like having relationships with publicists, which is extremely critical. And also equally critical is relationships with editors. And also social media is a gigantic tool that I use for networking my work, my voice as a writer. And so I think that, and just the way, since I'm doing this full time now as a freelancer, financially, that just takes a lot of like balancing for me. And like, I have to do things in a certain way in order to make first of the month rent. and so a lot of that is just like by trial and error. A lot of it came by just experience and doing it for this long. But yeah, it's not easy, and it takes a lot more than passion. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of just like saying no, negotiating up. I cannot stress that enough. So things like that.
Yeah, we just got our first question, but I'll get to that later, Jonathan, before we wrap things up. Let's talk about creating a profile for yourself, because, as Candice was just saying, establishing yourself and developing a reputation, within the industry means getting to know publicists and studio execs and managers and et cetera, so that you have access to the talent that you're looking to write about. So what's been your hurdle? What's been your how have you managed to overcome those hurdles of getting to know and really getting to establish a profile for yourself?
Me?
Terence, why don't we start with Terence?
One thing that I think is important, like Candice and Aaron have sort of hit on, of like talking to people or being in with the publicist. The thing that sort of really like launched me at award circuit was that I was covering film scores. Like I did a thing every award season that was like spotlight on scores, where I would talk about, because I love film music, and I just talk about, oh, like this is the score, this is why I loved it, this is why it may or may not be nominated for an Oscar. And that started getting the attention of the publicists, of the people that handle those composers, because that's not necessarily a field that everybody is angling to cover. And so when they see it, they're like, oh, hey, like I have this client, would you be interested in interviewing him? Or like, hey, like, you know, I'd meet them at a convention and we'd talk and it'd be like a wonderful conversation. And I just sort of use that as like a jumping off point. Like, I really think you have to find one of the few pieces of advice that I have today is just like finding, because there are so many people talking about movies now, it's a little different than when all of us started. You know, just especially online, like when I got into starting writing online, it was like everybody was starting to write online, and now everybody really is writing online. So it's really about finding the things that you don't see other people working on, but that you're also passionate about. That's what really helped me in the beginning. And I was a big, you know, as you can see by the various toys and things behind me, very into the pop culture things. And so I would go to Comic-Con, and that made me invaluable to Clayton because I was the only one going. You know, so I got all of the comics related people, all of the, you know, the TV and the movie people that were going there, I got to talk to and cultivate those relationships with. So it really is about like figuring out the stuff that you like to write about that you maybe don't see already in the marketplace.
So finding your niche, finding your lane
Yeah.
within, yeah. Candice?
As far
Those
as hurdles,
those building blocks, you know, establishing the relationship with the publicist, with the people that you need to know in order to, you know, fortify your brand.
yeah, I mean, I say more voice than brand, only because I don't really have a niche in terms of what type of films that I cover or TV. And so I don't really like to, I don't really like the idea of being pigeonholed, but I do think that as a Black person, particularly as a Black woman, I am often pigeonholed, but that's not something that I put on myself. Just because I know that that's already going to be something that's going to be put on me, and that's a constant hurdle between on both the editor end as well as the publicist end. And so that is something that I think is still a struggle. I mean, I think people who are just starting out have more of a struggle with that. But I mean, I've been doing it for a while, so it's not as much. It doesn't present itself as much like, oh, I can only cover XYZ just because I'm a Black woman. And so that was something that I was running into a lot early on, especially
Well, that's the
coming
next
from.
question, actually.
Oh, really? I'll stop talking then.
No. And Aaron,
Same question.
yeah, same
Yeah. I you know, for me, as far as like hurdles that I've had to overcome, I mean, in terms of like developing who I am as the writer I want to be, or like what I want to put out there, yeah, it's not the way I've been viewing this. It hasn't been a matter of I want to, you know, be a part of this by way of this thing. Like, I haven't tried to define myself by a certain thing I do. There's things I lean into. If I want to continually randomly posting about Godzilla, I'm going to do it because I like Godzilla. But I mean, it's not the area where I'm like, this is the only thing I'm going to cover. So as far as hurdles go, it's been a matter of just being on a constant, you know, being on that constant level with various publicists or what have you, just to have the access that I require to do the thing that I want to do, as opposed to, you know, having to like really search around for it. The overcoming that hurdle is just, again, putting in that time and effort. And regardless of how deep a relationship goes with anybody that you're contacting with on emails, it's just having the you know, the ability to reach out to the right people and, you know, find what you need as far as screening access or interview access or what have you. And that's, you know, I don't know what the correct answer is as far as how to tell, you know, people that are newer to this arena, like how to do that. But I mean, experience and putting in the time is certainly a major factor.
Well, one thing would be consistency. I mean, to certainly, if you know, have an assignment, or if you, you know, if you have an assignment A, you deliver it and deliver it on time. And and recognizing that people's time is money, you know, that's how I look at it. So if you're interviewing someone, if you're, you know, going to see a movie, that there's certain expectation that comes with with those outings, you know. And I think that's a big way that people are able to, you know, establish a name for their work, for their bylines that enable them to get the access that they need in order to grow their careers. But let's
Honestly,
talk.
I just real quick, I like it to, you know, the goal for me is just make it easy. Like I feel like we can all like we all like writing. I think that's a big part of it, and I certainly am passionate about the writing process. And you know, the easier it is to get to do the thing you need to do to get to that point where you can write about it, the better. It's really helpful to like, you know, have a certain kind of rapport or to have all the right context in the world. But like, bottom line is, if it's easy to get done, if it's easy to get that access, then great. That's what I'm looking for. If they're, you know, what the result I get out of that as far as building a bigger base, building a bigger audience, bigger viewership, that's gravy essentially. But the goal I have in mind is just like, I want to be able to put my voice out there, which is like good. I found
Right, and
it.
you're only gonna. Another thing I'm saying is you're only gonna get the access as if you're consistent in your delivery.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's talk about race and talk about what role it's played in your career. Has it had impact, or is it something that you know? I mean, I know that you, Terence, you are in a particular. You specialize in a particular genre largely, so maybe race hasn't been as much of a factor for you as it might be for Candice or for Aaron, who may write about a broad set of things.
Yeah, I think I lucked initially. I think I lucked into writing for a word circuit because Clayton is a person of color. So it never had to be a situation where like I am the Black male writer on the staff who likes genre stuff. Like I like lots of things. Like if I, you know, if you want me to review the 3-hour Oscar contender, I will do it. You know, but like sort of having that sort of protection from your editor in chief was great. But then sort of as I've gone on, I only feel like it comes like with me, just I only feel like it comes up when there's like an expectation on a movie whether or not a Black person is supposed to like it or not. And that doesn't necessarily have to be strictly Black content. I think about something like The Revenant, which I did not like. And I still do not like to this day. But like a lot of the blowback from stuff like that can be like, oh, like you're Black, you don't get a movie like that. You know, conversely, it's like if you don't like a Black movie and you're reviewing it, it's like, oh, but like we need it to succeed because it's Black. And so that's where I find sort of, you know, the really difficult line to walk with regards to race. And, you know, you get, you know, people comment on things and they have, you know, they feel like they could say whatever to you because you'll never see them face to face. But like, yeah, for me, it's more about like what the expectations are on this movie that you then come in with in a review that you either meet or you don't. So that's sort of where it's been sort of the most prevalent. There's like a really famous moment where I said Zac Efron gave like a decent performance in the South by Southwest movie, and somebody came at me with a pretty funny comment. But like outside of that, it hasn't quite played a role. But I think it has been tough with regards to access, like Aaron is talking about, and I'm sure Candice knows. It's like when they have the Black movie, you get all the access that you need. But when it's not the movie with all the Black people in it, then it's like maybe you get the last screening or you don't. And that is hard when you're trying to make a name for yourself and you need to review the movie around the same time everybody else is to be in that conversation. So
that goes both ways though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like I think of something like the Black Panther release where in LA, Disney was very happy to announce how they shipped in many Black critics from across the country. And I know who didn't get to go to that premiere. They started with Aaron and Terence.
Yeah,
and it's, you know, and yes, there's an understanding that not everyone is writing on the same level exactly, but at the same time, it's like, well, where are those? And that's not just speaking exclusively to us on this, you know, this broadcast, but there are plenty of people of color and specifically Black critics in the world. Like, what is the requirement to be in this special panel of like we get pulled to be in this, you know, premiere for this giant black blockbuster. I don't know what that is exactly. I know what you're saying as far as, yeah, there are certain movies that have exclusively black casts or are certainly focused in that arena that for whatever reason, you suddenly, oh, there's all this access we have to it. But when it comes to some of these bigger players, not always the same. And I don't have an answer to that, but it's certainly something you can notice when you're seeing on Twitter a live stream of all of these people that are at this premiere, and it's like, oh, that's nice.
So, I mean, Aaron, how have you navigated race, managed that with and dealing with your editors and dealing with some of the other people that you have to deal with to get your stories?
You know, I can't say that there's like been a direct incident or anything of that nature that's like affected me as far as what I'm doing. Now, I can't say that that's impossible that didn't happen, because that's just the nature of the world. I am a mixed race black critic that works in this world and no doubt has faced certain things, whether I'm aware of them or not. But as far as how it's affected me, I don't try to let things get me down. I want to do a thing, and I'm going to, work the best way I can. Are there certain angles you can work to accomplish that? Perhaps. Are there ways to, make your voice heard or express a certain kind of opinion? Yes, there are, and you can do that through social media means or just in emails or what have you. I haven't had to, confront anybody over a way that I felt disrespected or whatnot, and I feel lucky for that. I know others are less fortunate in that matter. But I've started, just like this Black Panther thing I pointed out, which is not something I'm holding over anybody, it's just an example, but it's the kind of thing where you kind of notice it, where I feel, not necessarily like a benefit, but where I feel I've tried to kind of do something in that regard. It's honestly having the podcast. I host a podcast with my friend Abe, who is of Asian descent, and we have a variety of guests on every week, including Terence a number of times, that are of a broad spectrum. That doesn't mean I disinclude certain people, but it's nice to think, someone on a level that I am, which is not super high and, respect of things, along with my friend who doesn't have any, kind of critical background. We're just happy to get on and talk about movies together and have other critics on that similarly, for the most part, don't have the largest voice in the community. There's some notable guests or what have you that I could, that we've had on, but a lot of it's just people that we get that relate to us that are also generally, there's a lot of people of color, what have you. And I, whatever I can't accomplish on the base that I'm at as far as my writing goes, I'm happy to think that, a podcast that I've been doing for nearly a decade now, that's something I can contribute as far as getting other voices out there.
I mean, do you feel a responsibility, like Terence was mentioning, and I know Candice has had to deal with this, as have I, to Black content?
Do I have a responsibility to it?
Do you feel a responsibility? I'm not saying you have.
Okay, yeah. Do I feel a responsibility to it? It's to a degree, as far as there are certain kinds of films that just won't get that much attention. And I'm not, now that's not just specifically not talking about, the big blockbusters or big, mainstream films, but other ones where, yeah, they're made by people of color that are from smaller studios or what have you. And there's going to be plenty of reviews written about the big movies. There's not going to be as many reviews written about the smaller movies that have these other voices, whether they're established or not. And especially now in this quarantine we've been living in, where there are a lot of movies out there, specifically not mainstream ones, but that are just streaming and that are just going out there and have no press or what have you. I do like that I have a chance on the weekly basis to write about a lot of these movies and, do something about that. Whether or not it gets attention, at least I tried, for something that I like to think that I appreciate to some degree.
I mean, Candice, what are your thoughts? You're, the Black Carrie, girl journalist in the big city, but you're also a Black woman. So
I am.
How do we navigate? How do we, you're writing for some of the biggest publications in the world. So what's been your way to sort of keep, obviously you're owning completely your Blackness, but not to make that the biggest issue in the room when it comes to story assignments?
Yeah, I've actually, even lately, I've had to remind editors, like, hey, I'm happy to not write about or not write exclusively about Black movies, just especially for like editors that I'm like newly working with. And I'm just like, I don't know I don't know where they're getting this idea, but I was just like, oh, let me stop before this gets too far. and I'm happy to, and I always say, I was like, I'm happy to write about Black films. I love good films, no matter who makes it. But I don't want to ever, I've never come into journalism with the idea that I was just going to write about Black stories. That was never the thing. That's often put on me, but that's never been my, that was never my impetus. And so I have said that on a few occasions to editors. It's often, I mean, like sometimes it's just like whatever. Like I feel like, especially in the last couple of years, with the ascension of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think editors and particularly publicists in some regard are feeling a lot of pressure from a lot of different arenas that Black content should only go to Black journalists and publicists, which again, publicity is largely white. And so that's a whole other thing. But, and even of Black films, mostly white publicists. So it can be quite complex. But yeah, I've had to just be transparent. But that's definitely an uphill battle for sure.
But then, also it's sometimes the preference of the creative team making the movie. I know John Singleton, went on record to say that he, really appreciated AFCA because we represent a group of people who he felt would uniquely understand his movies. And which is why I posed the question to Aaron, where does that responsibility sort of begin and end? Because maybe if I Will Destroy You, which is the HBO series that came on last summer, in some ways that was a very unique experience, about from a Black woman, and a Black woman would probably be able to offer a greater interpretation of what that series was all about.
And part of it's like the industry comes from there's a bit of a disadvantage from the outset, right? As far as who's been writing about these things versus people like us, that there's not as many, or at least not as many, that are pushed up in a certain limelight. So yeah, you have to find it, someone like John Singleton speaking to like the opportunity, like I would get that because there is not as much content written by certain types of people that cover these movies. And so if things were different and everyone's just available and you constantly had a nice balance of voices being heard, that's one thing, but that's just not the way it is, right?
And particularly with Candice, because she's writing for outlets that make a difference, that people that really move the needle. And so when that decision comes to whether or not we want her eyes on this versus someone who may not really get it, Candice?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that's still occurring. I mean, I guess like to your earlier point, I will say like when you were talking about John Singleton, which is a good example, but I think that when we talk about responsibility, what I also kind of push back on, I think that there is another responsibility that is put on us, but I will also add that because that responsibility is placed doesn't mean that we are obligated to say that this is a fantastic film, which I think that gets very much lost repeatedly.
Absolutely.
And then, and if you say anything critical at all, it's like a whole thing. And so like, that's where like, when I hear responsibility, I was like, yes, but also just understand that I am in no way obligated to, write a flattering review or say something super positive. I'm also not obligated to be quiet when something is problematic. And even if that comes from a Black filmmaker.
Ideally, that comes just from being honest with yourself as a writer.
And having integrity as a writer.
Exactly. Right. And I mean, we're at an age where, yes, social media obviously pumps up a lot of things depending on what they are and what's trending or what have you. you just got to distance yourself from that if you feel like that's some kind of factor that's going to affect the reaction to the thing that you decided to write because that's how you felt.
Yeah, I felt ugh, Candice just hit a nail on the head. I definitely it's sort of like a microcosm of how I feel about like when you go to a film festival and you watch a smaller movie that is potentially angling for distribution, and you have to make the decision about one, if I hate this movie, am I going to review it? And then two, if I hate this movie and I am going to review it, how am I going to talk about it in a way, because these are people's dreams, and so it's the same sort of thing with Black cinema. It's like we want the diversity of the content. We want these different things. Like the reason why it feels so high pressure is because it's like, even with the great strides that we made, there's just not as much content coming out. And so if you don't like Malcolm and Marie and Judas and the Black Messiah, what are you going to do this Oscar season? And then it's like it becomes, it's like this weird. For the record, I like Judas and the Black Messiah. Malcolm and Marie is a different conversation, but like even when I was writing that, I felt kind of emboldened by the fact that everybody was going to be writing about that at the same time, versus them being like, hey, here's this Black movie, can you write about it? And being like, oh my God, if I have to work with my integrity and this movie is bad, maybe Zendaya and John David Washington don't get to make another movie. So it's like the external pressure is put on you in those sort of moments. And I'm fine being honest and telling people, how I feel about movies, but it definitely becomes like this weird ecosystem, because yes, we do understand it more. It's the reason why you can, like, I would love to read Black critics' takes on Black things, or why I would really like to read Black women talk about I May Destroy You, because like that is a perspective that maybe has another level of understanding. It just shouldn't, like Candice shouldn't only write about those types of projects, because like she also has an understanding of other types of projects, and you can only bring yourself to these reviews. So when external forces get put on you, that's when it becomes tough.
We're talking
when
a
it
bit
comes
about
to criticism,
sorry.
I'm sorry. I mean, but it's not what you say, it's really how you say it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
that's what I was going to point out. The idea of like you're honing your writing craft is a huge part of that, obviously. And when you talk about movies like Judas and the Black Messiah, Malcolm and Marie, like that, as a critic, and not as any critic, I mean, it's less about you saying definitely go see this movie. You're just expressing your level of enthusiasm or a lack thereof. And ideally, your reader is going to look at that, and that includes the various people that have maybe made the movie that decide to read the reviews, despite maybe many of them saying that they don't read reviews. I think there's the aspect there should be, it's not about whether I convince somebody to go and see it. It's about like, how did I convey what I felt about this thing, and did that convince me that I have some kind of curiosity now or not? Regardless, I at least I have an awareness of this thing now that I did not before from this specific person. And there's plenty of other people out there that can also provide that same kind of awareness.
So we're in award season.
Oh,
and I did sign when I said that. How do each of you deal with the demands, the enormous demands of this time of year? Ooh. When every email is important and the packages never stop coming with all the different trinkets and whatnot and enticements to saying, hey, like me better. So how do you find, what's your trick for surviving award season? Terence?
Even though I love the stuff,
some of it,
but getting stuff has never swayed my vote. But please still send it if you're a publicist or person. I will gladly accept it. I've actually, like, I got started at award circuit, so I'm like, I remember being so deep in it and like thinking about every movie in the prism of the Oscars. And when I left, I like really pulled back from that, because it was such a like drain to think about it can be such a drain to think about movies only in respect to what is being nominated. So I sort of have flipped that on its head, and I'm like, let me just advocate for the stuff that I really like. And if it doesn't get nominated for an Oscar, that's fine. I still like the movie. But really, really sort of looking at it in terms of like advocacy, you know, because like my favorite film in 2013 was like The Conjuring. That was never going to be nominated for an Oscar, but that it's great.
Conjuring.
Yes, like it's phenomenal. So, you know, when I do a top 10 or I submit, you know, my ballot to the Hollywood Critics Association, it's gonna have the stuff on it that I like. So it's really just about, for me, it's like I've had to pull back from like the daily conversation. I can't do who's gonna win the Golden Globe and who's going, you know, and the statistics and all of that anymore. I just have to be like, I really like this movie. I'm happy to see it win, or it didn't get nominated, but I really like this movie.
Hey, Carla, thank you for joining us.
Hi, sorry.
We're talking about awards season and the
Okay.
additional demands that it puts on our time as journalists, as A&E journalists. And I know that you're based in LA, and I know that a lot of stuff is definitely coming at you. How do you navigate that? How do you manage that?
You mean the amount of titles and things that come your way during award season?
Right. And the
So
pressure
usually,
that exists for you to get behind the project.
so usually I make sure that I see the bulk of I can usually tell. I've been doing it long enough that I can tell when I go to the film festivals, you know, Sundance and Toronto and Tribeca and some of the other ones, I can usually tell what is going to kind of make the cut when award season rolls around. So I would have already seen the film by the time the buzz starts. I would have already formed an opinion about it by the time the buzz starts. And so I don't feel that pressure to be like, oh my goodness, I have to see this film. I have to come up with an opinion about this film. By that time, I've usually seen the film about 2 or 3 times and established a pretty firm opinion about it. And I don't allow outside forces to color or dictate what my opinion is. My opinion is my opinion, and it's a really strong one. So
We can tell.
So of course you can. So I pretty much stand firm to that. What I do think is a lot of pressure is the fact that when by the time it gets down to the 5 nominees, because you can tell when the Critics' Choice Awards comes out and all the different film critics awards around the country, when all of those start to filter in, you can kind of tell what way it's going to go.
Who's lining up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what I find unfortunate about that and pressurized about that is the fact that, you know, I have my favorites, and sometimes they're not always the ones that end up in the race because I'm not a part of those organizations that vote for the final entity a lot of the times. So that's a little frustrating from a critic standpoint because you see really good quality films, really good quality work that don't make it to the cut. What you often do see make it to the cut are people that have a tendency to be awards darlings time and time again. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it would be nice if, you know, something that really was of quality, you know, like some small indie film kind of just bust through and pave the way like Parasite did last year.
Or like Moonlight did a few years earlier.
Right.
So it does happen, but perhaps not as often as we'd like.
No, not in my opinion.
Candice, I've never experienced award season in New York, but what is that like? I'm sure it's a lot of fun, pre or post COVID, not, you know.
Yes, that we get more snow, so there's that. I feel like, because I'm not really a premieres person, I don't go to a lot of premieres and a lot of award shows or anything like that, and a lot of that happens in LA, as I'm sure you guys are all accustomed to. I think, yes, I do get the swag. Nothing and no one has ever deterred my opinion of anything. And like Carla, my opinion is strong, and it's, for the most part, I would say like 80% of the time cannot be swayed. And so, especially when it comes to like these awards conversations, which I find just exhausting, just because I'm not an awards pundit. I vote for what I want to win, not what I think is going to win, and not who I think my colleagues want to win. I could care less. Um, I really want what I consider to be quality, who I consider to be quality, to get what they're due. It's often, I would say, 50% of the time at best is correlated with what's actually nominated or what actually does win awards. And 50%, again, that is on a good day. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't feel particularly overwhelmed by anything. I mean, because everything's like at the top of the next year, like right now, I'm not even thinking about 2020. 2020 is like so far away from me, because I'm looking ahead at like the slew of film and TV that's forthcoming in 2021. So I'm kind of checked out with just like one toe in 2020. So I don't really have that pressure as probably some of my colleagues do.
You know what else I want to add, if I may? Candice and I have been at film festivals together and watched films together. And the thing that I love about that experience that I missed pre-COVID is that you will come out of a movie and walking out talking about a film, and someone will bring up a scene or a moment in the film that can totally change your mind about how you were digesting that film in the moment. Because I know Candice and I had that moment during a film at Sundance one time, and she said something, I was like, oh, right, I would have never thought about it that way. And it made me just look at it a little differently. Those conversations I do miss. Not that it swayed my opinion, but it just made me look at the film in a different light.
Aaron, anything to add?
I mean, there's a lot of things that have been stated that I agree with already, but I will say that the benefit of award season is that, hey, I get to give my dad a chance to see a lot of things before anybody else, because it's very convenient for me to hand him screeners and say, watch this, you'll probably like it. As far as how it...
You're supposed to be the only one.
as far as having a chance to, I don't know, getting, various goodies or what have you, that's nice, I guess, but it doesn't make me suddenly like the Trial of Chicago 7 any more than I already do or don't. It's like, okay, great, I have a big book now. Like, I don't know what else, you're going to try to convince me of, but, handing me things isn't going to be the solution to that. I'm very happy to look at the films that I chose as the best of the year as the ones I'd want to champion for, the rest of it. And if they align with how things are going as far as awards pundits are predicting things, that's nice, I guess. But the fact is, like, I like the things I liked, and I'm happy to, continue championing those things. If I had my way, like if I got a food bank from the Nomadland people, I'd be happy to donate that. And if I could make,
it was good.
If I could make a Small Axe suddenly count as a film again, I'd be doing everything I could to make sure that gets a lot more notice than it currently is. But so yeah, it can be upsetting that certain things that have a smaller, fan base or what have you don't get the attention that I think they deserve. But at the same time, I did what I could as far as my I'm concerned to throw something out there as far as my writing goes, the podcast goes, or whatnot. And it'd be nice to see more change. It'd be nice to be able to know that I've convinced more to vote on something or what have you that I really want to champion. But as far as award season goes, am I a factor in it? Not a huge one, but things will go the way they do until they start to change. So.
Okay, we have a question. And audience members, we encourage you to please go to the Q&A section and send us your questions. Jonathan Schwartz is asking, as someone who majored in African American studies in college and who wrote a thesis on African Americans in film, I'm considering starting my own film blog on the subject. Any advice on how to start? And anyone can take that to answer it.
Practically, WordPress is great. WordPress.com to start your blog. And I actually think that'd be cool. I think that's a great, like, you found something that you're passionate about and you want to write about. And all you really have to do is start writing. I think that's sometimes the bit, like, we want to do things and then we just keep wanting to do them and wanting to do them. But I think that you have genesis of an idea that's going to be very specific. So like you can become an authority on it. So like anybody who wants to do African American history can theoretically come to you or come to your blog and learn more, as well as reach out to you. So yeah, I just think you have to just do it, and don't expect to be like the Hollywood Reporter level traffic day one. That they have had 100 years to get to where they are. So really just starting from the ground and just writing.
Yeah. Shaping your prose, I mean, is important. Shaping your voice, finding out, what it is that you like to write about by writing, I think is the, especially if you're starting your own, grassroots, starting from scratch, which is, a lot of what I've done is just building it from the ground up. That's the way to find out what direction you want to go, whether it is writing about very specific things like the, tackling a certain genre of film or a certain, kind of filmmaker or what have you. But doing that consistency is key as well. Like that's, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And the more you'll think and realize, hey, this is the kind of thing I want to keep focusing on, or maybe I want to, go to a different direction because of how I've decided to keep writing and what I've discovered from that.
Yeah, it's very important to work that muscle, like anything. And Nike's slogan is true. Just do it. Quit talking about it and just get out there and start. Carla, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say scheduling apps can help you a lot when you're starting a blog, so you can take the pressure off of yourself of trying to figure out what you're going to write every day. You can plan your post, every week or every 2 weeks, whatever, or bi-weekly, whatever works for you. And then you also want to find a name for your blog, something that is indicative to your brand and who you have decided your voice is going to be as a film blogger, so that people can say, oh, let's catch the Curvy Critic today, or have you seen the Curvy Critic's blog? You know what I mean? Find a name that is catchy, that people will remember who you are, and not make it too long so that people can find you. You want people to be able to find you for you to be able to build up the traffic and the audience for your blog.
Candice, anything you'd like to
add? I can't stress enough finding your voice as a writer. When I was first starting out as a journalist after getting a degree, pretty much every editor across the board was saying finding your voice is not, which is different from your brand, and which if it's like African American history, that is your brand, but your voice has to be whatever you are. It has to, because you're not going to be the only person that's going to be writing about African American films. There's so much of that out there, especially now. And so it's really about what are you contributing in terms of how are you enhancing the conversation, and whether that's through your academics and whatnot. And I think also when I look at certain content, there is a difference between, I can instantly tell if someone is writing from an academic point of view, or rather than a more consumer-based, reader-based, viewership-based journalist point of view, which is quite different. I've never written through an academic voice, but I think determining how you want to create nuance in that voice, if you want to stay within the academic space or reach a larger audience.
Rick has sent us an interesting question. When the pandemic ends, what do you think normal will look like for the film industry? With mega studios now and independents shrinking, I'm worried about the business. I'm worried that the business will finally kill the art. Any thoughts?
Nothing will ever kill the art of cinema. I mean, cinema will never, ever go away. The way it is consumed and the way it comes at us may shift and change, but it'll never go away. And as far as how the pandemic has shifted the industry, virtual junkets are not going anywhere either, because the studios and the PR companies and all those entities that spend money on those events, those premieres, those red carpets, all of those things, they're seeing very, very, very vastly how much money they are able to save by not doing all of that stuff. There'll be some people that go back to that, but the majority of them, I'm like, I can save $100,000 over here and put it over here to something else. I think I'm gonna do that over there. But yeah, cinema will never be killed. The art will never be completely null and void, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And a lot of those junkets are not just six figures, they approach seven. So yeah, you're right. We're definitely going to see some permanent changes.
Yeah, and I think I definitely agree with what Carla said. And I also think in terms of like talent, I feel like talent access will get a little easier, because one of the things that's tough with junkets, this is just from a practical, like, since we're all critics and we've all covered these types of things, is like trying to get your foot in the door to get an interview with somebody can be very, very hard. But with phone interviews, with virtual interviews, you can cycle through those things like that, and the talent can be comfortable. They can be in their house talking to you about, you know, promising young woman, and you don't need to be at the Four Seasons. The Four Seasons is nice, but like, you just don't need to be there. So from that standpoint, I think it'll
real
help.
though. We miss that food.
Yeah.
We miss those snacks.
You know, I'm worried
do.
about them. What are they going to do? I've been real worried about the Four Seasons. How they're going to make it through.
It'll be different, but I also think this is going to give disabled critics or not able-bodied critics a real chance to be in the industry, covering this industry in a meaningful way. Because like this year, we've gotten so many screener links and so many screeners, and even though studios will go back to screening movies, I think that now at least those critics who maybe can't go to a theater can have the access.
Or who don't live in LA or New York.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Candice?
sorry. I would say particularly, and I think Sundance, I don't have the exact numbers right now, but I know Sundance released a report, something to the effect of just like, that was their largest attended festival ever, I think, or in the last TK years, how long years? And I mean, part of that is because journalists from everywhere in the world were able to attend. That's on top of the general audience who was able to attend from everywhere. That is, I mean, I can imagine that's exponentially more people. And so I think that and I'm wholeheartedly with Carla, like I've never been concerned with the death of cinema. I've never been concerned with that. I don't think that's ever going to be a thing. We have survived way worse in all of film history. And so, yeah, I think this is providing access. I think films that when I look back at 2020, the films that I think people were talking about certain films that I don't think that they would have originally seen if we weren't all home with nothing else to do or with no access to it. That's something that the pandemic actually helped us. And, that I think that's a good thing. So I hope it continues to go in that direction, or they'll find some other type of algorithm to make that benefit once the world reopens.
Another question is, what movies are you excited about at the moment? Just your top two.
Terence already knows what I'm going to say, but Godzilla versus Kong is the thing that I'm looking forward to. I mean, there's plenty of good stuff coming. You got Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley coming. PTA's got a movie coming out. Candyman, I can't look forward to, but
I'm living for that.
But I mean, that goes back to the pandemic question. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing Godzilla versus Kong. At the same time, the preference wouldn't be to watch it on my admittedly large TV. Like, it'd be nice to watch it on a giant screen. And so, like, that's where I'm curious about where the industry goes in that regard too. It's like, I look forward to seeing a massive blockbuster. I'm curious what blockbusters are going to do when they're getting the same amount of kind of talk time as a lot smaller things. And that goes back to that cost saving aspect as well. It's like, why spend all this money when you're going to watch a movie that can be talked about and then discarded in a week? It's what I'm looking forward to.
Right. I'm looking forward. There's two different Shirley Chisholm projects coming up, one by Regina King and one by Viola Davis. And I'm just interested to know which one is going to hit first, because it's like the battle of the Shirleys, just like we got the battle of the Arethas right now. And I'm kind of excited to see those two projects too.
Candice?
Oh, man. I had a longer list, but you just said two, and it's only had to be movies. And I have all these TV shows.
Our TV shows.
Well, I would say just because it just dropped on Shudder right now, and I have great interest in horror is The Dark and the Wicked, which just dropped on Shudder. I think it is the best horror movie of 2020, and it just dropped on Shudder, so folks can now watch it. Another thing that I've been kind of keeping an eye on for a variety of reasons is the New York Times presents Framing Britney Spears. And that's a very interesting documentary in a lot of different ways. And I mean, I'm actually in the middle of binging Ginny and Georgia, which just dropped on Netflix.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that New York Times series goes, because they got so much attention for the Britney Project, and I'm just sort of curious to see, you know, what they're going to do next, who will be the next subject that they'll really give a deep dive to. Let's see, we have a question here from Stephen Williams. If theaters do survive the pandemic, what do they look like on the other side? Also, how many hours do you spend viewing content?
Ooh. Too many.
And that may differ depending on the season, award season, or
it definitely does
movies.
differ. My roommate works at a movie theater, and one of the things that I told it, one good thing is I was like, you can never go backwards with your cleaning standards. So we at least have that to look forward to. The cleaning standards can't go backwards post a pandemic. I think you're going to start to really, I think you go one of two ways. It's either you're going to see a lot more emphasis put on the blockbusters, and the mid-range movies will continue to go to streaming because these people have streaming services that they need to fill out, or movie theaters are going to be so starved to get you back that everything is going to play there. Like, they are not going to care about if it's just a blockbuster because they need the indie audience. They don't just want the indie audience sitting at home watching movies on HBO Max. They want people to come to the theaters because they need you to buy the popcorn and the hot dog and the sodas and all of that. So I'm going to look at it glass half full and think they're going to be like, anything that wants to play in a theater that they can show, depending on the type of theater chain that they are, that they're going to want to do.
But, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of filmmakers who are content with not having to deal with the burden of the box office right now.
Yeah,
And,
I actually think that's something that's really helped out, like, minority filmmakers. Like,
we don't have to say names, but we know the ones.
Yeah, it's because there have been a couple of directors in the past year that I have been very, very angry at their insistence that everybody go to the movies while, 500,000 people are dying in this country. But, like, I do think it's an interesting place to come in if you're like a younger filmmaker, if you're making your first movie, and streaming is an option, because now you don't have to worry about, like, oh, my film didn't make, a certain amount per screen. Like, that pressure can be taken off of you, but the audience will still get your content. Like, think about, like, Ava DuVernay talking about how people in Selma couldn't see Selma because there was no movie theater there. But maybe if that movie were made today, it'd get a release like Judas and the Black Messiah, and then they could have seen it in the city. So yeah, I think there's going to be it's like a democratization of it. It's not just going to be all theater chains, but I do think they're going to want to lure everybody back with a ton of movies.
Any other thoughts on that? Will movie theaters survive?
I think that I think the movie theaters, like the iPics, the ones that before the pandemic had that specialized kind of movie going experience where it was like 20 seats in a theater, I think those will probably do better than the big, huge theaters, because in the big, huge theaters, they're going to have to like resection those theaters. It's not going to, who wants to go and sit back up under somebody in a theater now after we've lost over, 500,000 people, one of my relatives being one of them. So it's like, I don't necessarily want to have that experience. I think what's going to happen is The studio films may go back into theaters, but I think the indie films and the smaller films are going to stay in the streaming route because more people can see the films that way, as opposed to trying to see them in an art house, because not all cities have art house theaters for people to see those types of films. So for them to stream makes it a little bit more universal for people to see it in their own homes. You know what I'm saying?
I'm very curious what that means as far as the behind the scenes aspect. We talk like the box office or what have you. And yeah, having the means to stream things, does that mean there's going to be more opportunities for smaller filmmakers to make things now? Or is it going to be, we're right in the middle of history. So it's like, it's hard to have that determination, but I'm still, very curious about it.
Candice, any?
No, I mean, I don't have anything
Particularly
new.
in a city like New York, where
Yeah.
that's a whole thing, dinner and a movie and
Yeah, that's why I'm just like, I just don't see people not going. I think the experience will be different, but I don't think the venue will be different. I think there will be, I mean, I know for myself, I have my own sensibilities that I probably won't be rushing to see it. I also have access that other people don't. So I don't have the urgency to do that. Yeah, I mean, like, because I go to the movies professionally, but I also go just like, with friends and family. And oftentimes after I've already seen something and I'm watching it new with them, I'll probably still do that. But it would be a far more cautious situation. And it would be once I'm ready to do something like that, once they're ready to do that. But yeah, I don't think that the movie theaters would go away. I do think they're struggling right now for sure. And there's so many options to go to movies here in New York, because there's art house and there's Blockbuster and there's like international theaters. It's everywhere. And so that's kind of our thing. Yeah, like you said, dinner and a movie.
This is a real good question. Do any of you ever worry about being able to say something, not being able to say something new?
No.
I know when I worked at a trade many, many, many years ago, it was sort of like grinding. You had to do 3 album reviews, 3 single reviews, 3. So when it gets to that kind of thing, you find those moments where, I was just telling a friend of mine, sometimes the muse is just simply not in the room. And she won't come in the room because she wants to be difficult. And despite all of your enticements, she just won't arrive. So, I mean, have any of you experienced that? I mean, other also known as writer's block.
Oh, writer's block. Oh, yeah.
Well, saying something new. You're trying to think of that real cool.
Saying something. Okay, I misheard the question, I think.
Yeah, I heard that differently. Okay, yeah, writer's block. That's something, especially if you're writing continually. And sometimes I'm just like sometimes I have a lot of stories that are pre-written in my head. And once I get them on the paper, I'm just like, I have that, what I call it, a very judgmental blank white page, just like flashing at me. And I'm just like, I don't have the words. They're all stuck in here, jumbled. But I have the thought. But yeah, that's a lot of times especially now in the pandemic, I have to like walk around my apartment several times and like, I don't know. Sometimes I watch things, sometimes I read things, which I can't stress enough is such a critical part of being a writer, is also being a reader. And so that might.
I mean, what are some of your triggers? Do you walk through the park, coffee, going to well, I guess you're not going out for coffee now, but what are some of the things that
Definitely reading, sometimes having a conversation with somebody. I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. I was telling this to somebody the other day. A lot of my story ideas come from like conversations with people. I'm just like, oh, that would make a good story, or like a question that somebody asked that I wasn't able to answer. And so those are kind of a lot of my inspirations. It's just from like getting out of my own head, as I call it. I need to like talk it out with other people.
Aaron, what about you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Carla, we'll come right to you next.
I think as far as finding something new to say, like creating something, like that comes from like, having a certain kind of passion, where I think for me, it's especially difficult when I like want to write a review for a movie I absolutely like loved, like I give like 5 stars, whatever, too, because it's like how do you put out their passion and enthusiasm in a way that's more than just I like this and this and this and this. And there's obviously there's ways to do that. We do this, so we'll solve that problem. But when it comes to saying something new, sometimes that just like it weirdly like applies to like movies I know are not going to get much attention or traction, and it's like, but I really put a lot of effort into like writing about this one thing. Or it could be just something that it just has that kind of X factor where you feel like you need to say more than the average kind of thing, like something like Small Axe, for example. I was very passionate about that. I thought it was the entire body of that work was my #1 film for last year, and I was very happy to like have the chance to see them in advance and write about each individual movie separately. And am I finding something new to say? For me, it felt like I was playing around with what I want to say about certain kinds of things beyond just describing what it is and why I liked it. I wanted to get into like what Steve McQueen's trying to accomplish with those films. Do those opportunities come all the time to say something new? For me, because I write mainly reviews, I don't so much write editorials too often. Like in my way, I know what I'm accomplishing, I feel like, on a weekly basis, and I'm generally very satisfied with that. I don't feel like I'm rehashing the same old thoughts again and just applying it to different movies. So do I get blocked? Not so much. Like it's sometimes, yeah, like take a walk, take a breath, do what you need to do to like refresh yourself. But I work through it, I guess.
You have to. Carla?
I don't get writer's block as much as I get writer's burnout, because sometimes the projects come at you so fast and furious that you have like 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces that have to come out like all on the same day or within a couple of days. And that kind of is annoying. And I just kind of take my time and go, you know what? I work for myself. I don't have a deadline. It'll get out when it get out. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, most of my stuff is usually generated. I usually skew the stories around something that I resonated with watching it, something in my life that I resonated with, that I can start the review off with to give it some kind of track, give it some kind of focus so that it's not all over the place.
Love that.
Yeah, something to that. I find that it's not necessarily, sometimes I do struggle with the pressure to say something new. And then I'm like, I'm just writing about a movie. And then I have to like give myself some grace. And I actually kind of find comfort in going back to like a templatized way of thinking about something. Because when you're really struggling, it's like, maybe that review is not meant to be the lovely personal essay with like one line about the movie. Maybe that review is meant to be introduction, plot, things you like, things you hated, conclusion. And
that's a good device too. Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to like go with it. Yeah, because the movies that are actually really hard to write about are the movies where you don't feel anything one way or the other. And that's where I tend to go to that like templatized function, because it's like, if I really hate a movie, there's lots of things I can talk about. If I really love a movie, there's lots of things I talk about. But if it's in that middle, then I'm like, all right, back to the template and just get to the end and hit publish.
It's interesting you say it. Like I mean, we're all different, obviously, but like when I see a movie that I have nothing I'm not passionate about it or what have you, that to me works as like a challenge. Like, okay, I have to write about this thing that I'm fairly indifferent towards. How do I make that interesting? How do I make that interesting for myself as a writer and to as a reader, as far as, this movie that, I don't feel either way about, or just it's an average film. I like the idea of sitting down and being like, okay, I'm gonna make this. I may be indifferent about this movie. I'm gonna make it the most interesting review I can based off my own interest in how to do that. Like that. That's me. It's just one way I look at it.
But to Carla's point, sometimes you just don't have the time. You don't have the time or the bandwidth to put that extra into it, because you've got to get to the next piece. As Candice put very well, rent's due on the 1st.
Rent is due, and it comes fast and furious every month.
I can't spend a lot of time with you, baby, because I gotta, because Papa gotta eat.
That's right. That is right.
You guys have been absolutely wonderful. Thank you. 2 of you, Carla, Candice, are members of my organization, the African American Film Critics Association. And Terence and Aaron, we would love to see both of you in our ranks as well. So Film Independent, it's been wonderful. We appreciate sharing this platform with you. And here's Paul.
Thank you, Gil. This has been terrific. We have so much to say, and we could keep going, but we are out of time. I just wanted to do a quick thank you around the table here and ask everyone where our viewers can follow you. Candice, where's the best place to follow you, on what socials? What's your handle? Oh, you're muted right now.
I was talking too. So Twitter at Real Talker, ReelTalker is where to find me and a lot of my work.
Great. Terence?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Terence B. Johnson. That's Terence with 1 R and no A.
Now, John, now, are you sure? You know, John. Every Black person in America is named Johnson. That's how we find you.
Terence B. Johnson. Yeah, it's my first name, middle initial, last name.
Got it.
You want to mention your website as well?
Yeah, and I write at lenoirauteur.net. LENOIRAUTEUR.net.
Great. Aaron?
Find me on Twitter, Aaron's PS4. My personal blog is thecodeiszeek.com. Everything I do ends up over there, but I write for We Live Entertainment and Why So Blue, and I host the podcast Out Now with Aaron and Abe, which is available everywhere you can find podcasts.
And Carla, great that you could join us. I know you said you were on set, but you are, of course, the curvy critic. Some of our Film Independent members would recognize you. So where
yes, they would. Yeah, you guys can find me across all social media platforms at The Curvy, CURVY Critic. My website is thecurvyfilmcritic.com, and you can catch my podcast on YouTube every Sunday Pacific time at 5 o'clock, The Curvy Critic with Carla Renata.
Wait, and Carla, can you take a picture?
Can I take a picture?
Can't you do it with your computer? No, I thought you were on an Apple where you could just take it or do a screen.
I am, but I don't know how to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you tell me how to do it, I can do it.
No. I'll just get a quick snap.
Okay.
I can do it too for you, Gil, as well.
Gil, Paula do it.
Oh, Paul, do it. Okay.
He just did it.
Oh, you okay? Thank you.
Hold on, here we are. And finally, Gil, AFCA has a website, right?
AFCA has a website, aafca.com. On Twitter, we're the AFCA, THEAAFCA.com. Aaron, thanks for the follow. Saw that. We're following you back. And on Instagram, we're at AAFCA. And on Facebook, African American Film Critics Association. And on YouTube, the AFCA channel.
Great. And thank you so much for moderating today. This has been terrific.
Thank you.
This has been
a lot of fun.
Yes, this was great. This has been a coffee talk with Film Independent. If you're not a member of Film Independent, you can check out filmindependent.org. Membership is open to everyone, filmmakers and film lovers. We will see you very soon back here for coffee talks. But until then, I want to thank our great panel, Candice, Terence, Aaron, Carla, and Gil. Thank you, everyone.